Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to the Booms and Bust Show, the weekly podcast where we discuss free markets, capitalism. We take the Michael, because what else can you do, out of socialism, cronyism, fascism. They're all on the same spectrum, and we show them up for what they are. We also try and find investment ideas that entirely up to you, no recommendations. You can go and analyse them and put them into your pension, and who knows, in 5 years' time you might have made a lot of money. Bearing in mind, some of them might go the wrong direction, in which case you have to effect your stop losses and move out. If you want to find out what I'm thinking on a daily basis, then check out the Twitter account of the Booms and Busts Show, which is at Booms Busts Show. If you want to contact me, you can either tweet me there, whether by notification or by direct message. I will see it either way. If you want to email me and do it even more privately, you can do so at jd@theboomsandbustsshow.com. Today is Monday, the 22nd of January 2018. January the 22nd already. We've had a very busy weekend. We've been out buying Christmas presents. I'll let that sink in for a second. But seriously, we did. I saw on Twitter, you know how much I love Twitter. I talk about it all the time. It's the finest news source available. And of course, you can set it up exactly as you want it. And over the years, I've done exactly that. I saw a tweet which said that Boots, which for those outside of the UK is ostensibly a chemist, but it does lots of gifts and all sorts of different things of a perfume type nature or whatever, was doing a 70% off sale of items that they had massively priced before Christmas. 70% off. I'm not kidding you. We bought 12 or 15 different items at 30 pence in the pound. They're now stuffed in a cupboard. They'll come out in 11 months' time. Lovely jubbly. That's a dozen presents. Thank you very much. And that is one wonderful thing about capitalism. In capitalism, with a market, you can pick whichever flavour ice cream you like from 100 options. Unfortunately, in socialism and democracy, you get to vote for one of 2, maybe 3 ice cream flavours. And in any case, after the fact, everyone has to eat the winning flavour. Oh, and by the way, both of the flavours are poisoned. Talking about competition and having the opportunity to buy what you want, when you think about it, in free markets, you get to go to the store and the bread is waiting for you there. The whole store is waiting for you and they're asking you to buy from them. In socialism, there's no bread there and you are desperately begging them to sell you something. That's the difference between capitalism and socialism. Last week in the show, I talked about Amazon and how Walmart is going to give them a run for their money. And you'll see that happens over the next couple of years. Today, Monday, the 22nd of January 2018, is an absolute milestone in technology and the way the 21st century is panning out. Because today, Amazon Go opened the first cashierless convenience store in the world, opened to the public. For the last 14 months, it's been under trial for staff only of the Seattle company. Today marks the public debut of the store. absolutely astonishing. Go and Google it. It's an amazing story. If you have the Amazon Go app open on your phone, you can walk through the turnstiles. It's a bit like the underground, the tube, the subway, whatever you call it around the world. And you don't even have to scan the item, because as soon as you pick it up and put it into your bag, cameras automatically log what you've picked up. It goes on your checkout list. If you put it back on the shelf, it immediately comes off your checkout list. Absolutely amazing. I mean, the 21st century is so... It's exactly what the science fiction movies of a few years ago, of 20 years ago, have suggested it's going to be. At the moment, it seems all lovey-dovey and fuzzy-wuzzy and soft and cuddly. I can assure you, it's nothing of the type. But it's coming, there's no question. I was going through one of the big 4 grocery store chains on Saturday with my elder daughter, and I pointed out to her as we were standing at the till, look along. This is a huge big store, a hypermarket. It used to have, I said to her, how many checkouts did this used to have? And she guessed 30. And I said, actually, it's probably closer to 40. I said, how many are there now? And she said, it looks about 6. I said, yeah, exactly. Because there's lots of scanning tills and there's lots of self-service tills. Whereas previously there was about 60 staff milling around the tills, there's now about 10 or a dozen staff milling around the tills. And of course, there's no question that within 5 years, there will be maybe a couple, and maybe not even that many. There's no question in my mind that AI is going to destroy millions and millions of jobs, millions even just in the United Kingdom, never mind in America and across the EU and Japan and the rest of the Anglo-American developed world. Goodness knows what those people are going to do for a living. I mean, seriously. You're either going to have money or you're not. And this is why they want to bring in the UBI, the Universal Basic Income, which I have said to guys in the radio. I said to, I think, BBC Radio London a few weeks ago, it'd be an absolute disaster. It would be Brave New World, Soylent Green, 1984 all rolled into one. Why? Because the government of the day will determine how much they're going to give you. And then they can take it away, and so on. I mean, it's just outrageous. On this week in history, January the 22nd, 1984. In fact, on this day in history. Come on, 1984. 1984. No, I'm not talking about George Orwell. January the 22nd, 1984. What came out, what consumer product came out which totally revolutionized home computing? You got it. The Apple Macintosh. Last week was all about Steve Jobs, and it just so happens that today's the anniversary of the Mac coming out. The first consumer computer to popularize the computer mouse and the graphical user interface. And it was introduced during the Super Bowl 18 television commercial. An astonishing feat of engineering and design, and we all benefit from it. Did it happen in a communist or socialist country? No. On this month in history, since 1992, on the 10th of January, what do you think has been celebrated in a famous set of islands just off the Argentinian coast? You got it. In the Falklands, Margaret Thatcher Day. 10th of January since 1992 happy Margaret Thatcher Day, the greatest Prime Minister that the UK ever had, in my humble opinion. Which leads me nicely into a certain Winston Churchill, and this is what he said to the great British public on television, no less, in 1950, when he was campaigning for the 1950 election.
Ladies and gentlemen, permit me, please, to claim your attention for a moment. It can only be a moment, for of course, in this, and in most other things, we are all on the ration. My friends, be under no illusions. It is an uphill road we have to tread. But if we reject the narrow, cramping doctrines of socialism, we shall surely find the way under a faithful and tolerant government to those broad uplands where plenty, peace, and justice reign. We have reached a crisis in our history. The vote that you will give on February the 23rd will profoundly affect the whole future of your home, your family, and your country. We have a choice before us, which is plain and clear for all to see. On the one hand, we may take a plunge, a further plunge, the second plunge, into the creation of the socialist state, all-powerful, planning all, providing all, arranging all, and controlling even the small details of the daily lives of all our people. On the other, we may regain the broad high road of free enterprise, of initiative, daring, with rewards justified, the success and diligence and thrift, and thus marching along with all the other nations of the English-speaking world, we may surely find our way out of our present difficulties and arise again as a strong, honored, independent state. And we may bring our people, the whole mass of our people, forward, not delaying the strong for the weak, but enabling the strong to go back and bring the rear guard in, enabling the strong to aid the weak and help them.
Mr. Churchill, I couldn't have put it better myself. Wasn't that amazing? 68 years ago. Now, we've talked a few times about cryptocurrencies on the Booms and Bust show. There's a report out from Ernst & Young, the big, accountancy and business services group, which says that of the $3.7 billion in initial coin offerings, ICOs, that has been raised, 10% of it has simply been stolen. There's a lot of fraud out there, guys and gals, a lot of fraud. Be very, very careful. More socialism from Oxfam, the so-called charity. They've just produced a report, Oxfam GB produced a report, while the richest 1% gain huge amounts of wealth, the poorest half of the world aren't seeing an increase at all. They're focusing on inequality. I couldn't agree with them more. There's massive inequality. Absolutely correct. Entirely due to cronyism and socialism. Oh, by the way, guess how much the US boss of Oxfam earns? $500,000. The head of a charity earns $500,000. And bearing in mind, imagine his expense account. Talk about hypocritical. And it says, I read also, at least 13 more staff in the US alone, earn well into big six-figure salaries. That's 14 of them earn big six-figure salaries. Yeah, they're campaigning about inequality. Welcome to the poverty industry. I think actually Oxford GB, if you obsessed less about inequality and more about the poor, you'd come to the logical conclusion that we should bring back capitalism, because all you have to do, Oxfam GB, at Oxfam GP on Twitter, is look at what capitalism has done to the poor over the last 100 years, bring back capitalism, and A, you'd reduce inequality, and B, you'd reduce poverty. Now, a not so shocking, but truly huge issue in politics in Washington has been going on in the last few days. Now, first of all, bearing in mind over the last couple of years, you've had Hillary Clinton, who has had thousands of emails deleted. You've had the NSA, who's had loads of emails deleted. Over the weekend, we hear the FBI have deleted or lost, as they say, hundreds of text messages. Now, there is, we know, a 4-page memo that only members of the US Parliament has been able to read, and they're not allowed to tell us what's in it. We hear it's explosive, quote unquote, shocking, alarming. It has politician after politician elected in the Senate, in the House of Representatives, going on television saying we need to release the memo. That's the hashtag. The American people deserve to know what happened regarding the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the FISA warrant regarding surveillance of American citizens for political purposes. Let's listen to Representative Mark Meadows of North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As many of you know, we have had a Russian narrative that has been going on because of an infamous dossier. And while there's been much reported on it, I can tell you that the Intel Committee has been fast at work, and Chairman Nunes has been doing outstanding work to get to the truth for the American people. Today, I had the opportunity to go into a confidential setting to make sure that what we can do is understand better what actually took place. And I'm here to tell all of America tonight that I am shocked to read exactly what has taken place. I would think that it would never happen in a country that loves freedom and democracy like this country. It is time that we become transparent in all of this, and I am calling on our leadership to make this available so that all Americans can judge for themselves. And I yield back.
Now we listen briefly to Maria Bartiromo, Mornings with Maria on Fox, interviewing Kellyanne Conway, who is President Trump's close advisor.
Let me turn to issues of privacy, Kellyanne. There's a memo being called Blockbuster, shocking memo circulating in Congress alleging U.S. government surveillance abuses at the top of the FBI, certainly. Some lawmakers are insisting that this memo be made public for Americans to read it for themselves. Listen to this.
The intelligence memo that we have just read is so alarming that it must be immediately disclosed to the American people. And the disclosure of this intelligence document must be a top priority for the country immediately. I cannot stress how important that is. Any American that would see this document would feel as though people like Rod Rosenstein and Bruce Orr need to be fired immediately.
Wait a minute, this actually happened from our Justice Department and this FBI. That's how serious this is.
So this memo obviously goes right to the Robert Mueller investigation, the special counsel, because we know that at the top of the FBI agents like Peter Strzok talking to his girlfriend Lisa Page saying that they need an insurance policy in place should Donald Trump win the presidency. Then you've got the number 3 guy at the Department of Justice, Bruce Orr, his wife working for Fusion GPS, who came up with that dossier, and whether or not the dossier was actually used as the justification to wiretap Trump Tower. What's your take on this? Will this memo be released to the public so that the rest of us can see what has gone on here?
Maria, let's hope so. And the reason's very simple. We have spent over a year of taxpayer dollars and precious time when Americans could have been informed about what this president has done for veterans, for taxpayers, for property owners, for coal miners, for anybody facing crushing regulations and unspeakable tax burdens, what he's done for security, ISIS in retreat, transparency, accountability, and prosperity. We've spent a year talking about Russia in this nation. People have tried to nullify his election from day one and try to discredit him. So all those folks, all those outlets who have those screaming Russia graphics or screaming graphics about shenanigans during the campaign last year, they ought to dust them off and we ought to see the memo. I've not seen the memo. I can't comment on it. I'm not in Congress. But in the interest of transparency and accountability and the interest of fair play here,
yeah, but people want to know if there's going to be criminal
right.
prosecution here, Kellyanne. Where's the accountability? We're in America. If we cannot trust the FBI, agencies like the IRS, the CIA, are going to be independent thinking, then why do we say we're in a free country?
Well, and this is a very important point because people watching right now are going to try to say that you or I or both of us are being mean to the FBI or discrediting. No, we're not. There are roughly 25,000 or so men and women working at the FBI. The president has made very clear many times, including going down to Quantico last month, that he respects the rank and file. We're talking about apparently a few bad actors, but they were in positions of real power, and they had positions of power with respect to an investigation. And we see now, we're starting to see that this is why Americans distrust institutions, or why they think there's no transparency and accountability. It's frankly, ironically, part of why Donald Trump won, because he was seen as the one who could shake up the system and turn the table over, and he's doing that. So I just hope that folks aren't going to find a slew of excuses, Maria, for not investigating the investigators now that we know what's happening here.
I don't think there's any doubt that that memo will be released, and I've seen other representatives on national political debate programs in America saying that this will not just result in resignations, but also sackings at the highest level in the intelligence services and in their civil service. And it will also involve jailings. Let's hope so. There's our best friend, Barack Obama. In 2009, as he entered the White House, he was worth a total of $800,000. Well, the guy had been a US senator. Fair enough. When he left the White House, he was worth $12 million. He was on a president's salary of $400,000 a year. He's now worth $40 million. only a year or so after he left the White House. So, 9 years after he entered the White House with $800,000, and a year after he left the White House with $12 million, he's now worth $40 million. His salary was $400K. Where did he get the money to buy multi-million mega homes and live the life of a prince? Where did all that money come from? Well, I can tell you. It's payback from Wall Street and the international multinational elite that's paid him absolute fortunes as payback for what he did for them. And that is the system. They don't get directly paid, although clearly he got vast amounts of money while he was president, but they don't get directly paid while they're in situ. They get payback subsequently. And it's not just the president, it's all of them, even down to the lowest of the low in the Democratic Party. They all get big, whether it's legal jobs, financial jobs, academic jobs earning $500,000 a year, and so on. The whole system is corrupt. There's no question in my mind that certainly if you work in government, you should not be allowed to enter the industry or profession that you were governing for 5 years after you leave government. No way. So, communism's never been tried. Hi, Comrade Lenin. Hi, Comrade Stalin. Hi, Comrade Mao. Hi, Comrade Pol Pot. Hi, Comrade Maduro. Yeah, communism's never been tried. You know, if you go onto the Twitter account at Boomsbust Show, see the pinned tweet, click on the tweet and just scroll down. You'll see photos and pictures and charts that I'm using in this show, which you can look at while listening to the show. Great news that as of this month, the Berlin Wall has been down longer than it was up. Isn't that fantastic for the folk in Eastern Europe? They have been living the life of Riley compared to what they experienced under socialism. Now, I've got... I'll do this first of all, and then I've say something else that I've got. This just sickened me. Totally sickened me. In Vienna, capital of Austria, 3 Jewish students have been fined €100 each for displaying the Israeli flag at a pro-Palestinian protest where you heard, and it's recorded, chants of "kill the Jews." They displayed an Israeli flag. What was the reason for the prosecution for which they were tried and found guilty? Insensitive behaviour and creating a provocation in Austria. Remember the Anschluss? Now, on a slightly lighter note, I've got a public service announcement to make, particularly if you're interested in football, and why not? A friend of mine has got 2 tickets to the English FA Cup final. You know, arguably the biggest football day in the UK and possibly in the world that follows football. And he paid £3,000 for these tickets. Obviously, it's happening in May. He bought them last year. Unfortunately, he didn't realise it was the same day as his wedding. Can you believe it? So look, if you're interested, he's looking for someone to take his place. Her name is Ashley. She's 5'4". She's a blonde. She's a great cook. She'll be the one in the white dress. Now, look at that chart. It is a chart of the dividend yields on European shares in blue, and the yield for in other words, the interest rate that you earn lending to in effect junk companies, or practically junk, the companies that the ratings agencies have given a low rating for credit quality. And isn't it amazing? You can now get a higher interest rate on investing in the market generally than you can get if you lend to the crappiest companies in Europe. So why would you lend to the crappiest companies? And the answer is you wouldn't. So how is it possible that the rate is so low that people have bid up those the prices of those corporate bonds so much, those junk bonds so much? Well, people haven't been investing in them. The European Central Bank has allowed not a single bankruptcy in Europe. They have been the one buying every junk corporate bond going. This is socialism, folks. This is state intervention at a scale that we've never seen before in human history. It's just frightening. Just frightening. And this is the first time, probably ever, that European junk bonds have yielded less than European equities. Now, the next chart is based on a study of academics. They wanted to find out what's the correlation between market statistics and future market growth or otherwise. So, for example, on the left-hand side there, the price-earning ratio has a 0.38 correlation, or a 38% correlation to what then happens over the next few years in the stock market. That's not a bad correlation. Obviously, 100% or 1.0 is an absolute correlation. But yeah, 38, 40%. Price earnings ratio, yes, it's pretty good indicator of what's going to happen in the stock market. But look on the other side. Look what has been found to have a zero correlation to the stock market. What the market believes is going to be GDP growth, earnings growth, stock returns of the past year, profit margins, and practically zero, the 10-year Treasury yield, and trend earnings growth. In other words, whenever you see charts of any of those things, believe me, it's been checked. They are not going to predict what happens in the market. Forget them. And indeed, this is the craziest thing. The fourth item from the left, rainfall has a bigger correlation to the market than consensus GDP growth. So whenever you see these macroeconomists, these pundits saying, oh, well, consensus GDP is 2.3% for the next year, forget it when it comes to investing. It has a zero correlation. Last year, everyone thinks of China as being an amazing economy and all the rest of it. And in some ways it is. It's breathtaking. But you have to understand what is causing the growth. In 2017, China added more debt than the US, the EU, Japan, and the UK combined. Breathtaking, isn't it? That is what's causing China's economic growth and development. Now, stock market. The next chart is really, really important. Not for today, in January's 2018, and maybe not even until 2019, but it's really, really important. What we're showing there is quantitative easing globally since, of course, it started in 2008. You see the Bank of England, not the Bank of England, the European Central Bank started in 2015, this sort of dark, blacky, grey, brown bars. And the dotted vertical line is the beginning of the year, looking to the end of 2019. Why? Because it's what the Bank of England, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, and the Federal Reserve have already told us. And they have told us that the Fed is actually going to start doing some quantitative tightening from now, and the ECB is going to reduce its quantitative easing. The Bank of Japan is going to reduce its quantitative easing. Indeed, going into 2019, the total amount of QE will be about $30 billion a month compared to $160 billion in 2016. So, based on what the major central banks have told us, don't expect QE to help markets going forward. And remember, markets are a forecasting mechanism. It's what stock markets do. They look to the medium term and they see how the land is likely to lie then, and they move accordingly. Does that mean that the stock market's going to crash? No. I'm saying be aware of what's on the horizon. Interesting point about the Dow Jones. I was not investing in Western markets, Western stock markets in 2014, 15, 16. And the Dow in November 14 was 17,900. In November 15, it was 17,200. In November 16, it was 17,900. In November 16, we put a sizable amount of proportion of our assets into global equities, of which about 45% was in the US. November 16, 17,900. January 18, 26,000. This next chart, very, very interesting. Bit complicated, but the red horizontal line is showing you where the monthly 14-period RSI is at or above an index level of 85. If you want to know the detail of what an RSI is, it's not this show to explain it. Go and Google it. Go and look at some videos. 85 is huge, and that's where we are right now. According to the right-hand index, we are, in fact, at 87 in January 18. The black rising trend line is the S&P 500. And you might say, a lot of people would look at that and say, well, the S&P is massively overbought, so it's going to crash. Look at the table. Since the 1950s, and this has only happened in 1% of cases, where the RSI on the 14-month is above 85, in 6, 12, 24 and 36 months, you have a materially positive S&P 500. Materially. And that doesn't surprise me in the slightest. There's a lot of really good things happening in the US and global economy. Can that change? Absolutely. But every time you hear bears saying, oh, the market's going to crash, and yes, the market could go down 5 to 15% at any point. And in many ways, I would welcome that. Why? Because it needs a breather. But what you'll hear after 5 or 10 or 15% is, this is it. 2008, 2001, this is it. It's the big one. Well, actually, when you start hearing that, that's when you should be piling into the stock market. Okay, that's a really important chart. It tells us that, everything's good. I talked a lot about interest rates, long-term rates, and how they're rising, and how we need to see them rise above major resistances in last week's show, which I think was show number 39. Go and listen if you haven't listened. If you're in government bonds, if you got a big mortgage, this is the kind of thing you want to know. Interest rates are very likely rising. There's a lovely chart of 10-year US Treasuries, not the interest rate itself, but the bond product, bond prices. And as you can see, they're right on massive, massive support. And most importantly, in the middle of, what would that be, or the end of 2016, early 2017, actually, the bond prices broke the 34-year trend line. 1984 was the low. The trend has been up for the last 3 or 4 decades, and in fact, sustainably, the price broke that incredible trend line, which had gone for 30-odd years. Probably just about the longest trend line in important financial markets. And expect, very likely, materially lower government bond prices, materially higher interest rates. Now, it's not going to be a straight line down in prices and up in interest rates. On the contrary, no. But it does seem increasingly likely that over the medium to long term, interest rates are going to rise and rise and rise and rise. For all of you people who've got lots of money in houses, or a house or a flat, and you believe that that's what's going to bail you out in your retirement, think again. If you're a buy-to-letter, is all I can say. Gold, lovely bull market it's in right now. I've said it before and I'll say it again. So long as gold is above 1300, 1310, shall we say, or 13.5, 1310, you've got to be bullish. There's a lot of Twitter bears out there, but they've been bearish for weeks. while gold has gone from 1240 to circa 1340. Yes, it could dip to 1310, 1305, but that would be a really brilliant new buy point. If, however, it goes below 1300, then yes, you've got to be bearish, relatively short term, and it could go all the way back down to the first half of the 1200s. While it stays above 1310, you've got to be bullish, and you've got to be looking at the high 1300s, 1380, 1400, maybe even 1425, 1450, possibly. But 2018, it's shaping up for a very sizable bull market. It had a big low in December of 2016. The major low was December, January of 2015, early 2016. It then shot up, then pulled back to 2016 December. And that was at about $11.50 in December 16. We've seen it up to the mid 1300s, 1350. We've seen it back to 1250. It seems to me that whatever it does relatively short term, yes, we're looking at 1550 to 1700 in 2018. We shall see, but that's what it seems to me. Very interesting chart, quite long term. Gold priced in the basket of emerging markets currencies, and it's clear that gold is coming out of a major base, and because that's a multi-year base, it's going to be a multi-year bull market in emerging markets currencies, and that tells us a great deal about commodities in general, and gold specifically. The next chart is a very long-term comparison between the dollar and the euro. The dollar is breaking long-term support, and the euro is breaking long-term resistance. And I see absolutely no reason why those trends will not continue. Assuming they do, and I think it's a fair assumption, you can expect higher inflation, higher commodities for years, lower government bond prices. It's just going to be, it's going to be so easy to make an awful lot of money. Do with it what you will. I've been saying over the weeks and months the sort of things to be investing in. Just go and listen to the shows. They're there. There's no question. And not just relatively short-term things like gold, but long-term multi-year things as well. Talking of which, have you subscribed to the Booms and Busts report? It's a report that I do about every 2 months. It goes to anyone who asks for it. Your email address, send it to me. It never leaves this office, so you don't go on big lists or whatever. The only list it goes on is mine. You'll never be junk mailed. Actually, I've got nothing more to say about economics and markets. I hope that was of interest and of use to you. Do please talk to me about what I'm saying on the show on Twitter. Have a discussion with me. Disagree with me about what you hear on the show. I get very little direct feedback about what I'm saying on the show. Some of you guys delightfully say, great show, great podcast, and that's, of course, wonderful to hear. And I thank you so much indeed for those who do. But, you know, if there's anything that you're hearing in the show that you want to explore further, talk to me on Twitter. Let's get a discussion going. And then we can generally put it out on Twitter and other people can get involved. What I do want to say is thank you so much to, at the last count, the 17 Twitterers who retweeted last Monday's podcast number 39. That was a record number of retweets. Thank you so much. The prior record was 13. I think we did that twice. So that's just wonderful. That's great feedback. Thank you so much. I can't believe there's only 17 people who listen to the show, who appreciate the show, and who are on Twitter. Let's try for 20 retweets this week. By the way, you'll always see me at the Booms and Bust show retweeting, so don't count myself in the total number of retweets. Come on, 20 of you, let's get a retweet of show number 40. And I'm talking particularly about the pinned tweet. There's only one pinned tweet, not the other tweets that are sort of replies to it, just the pinned tweet. Let's see if we can get 20. If you haven't retweeted number 40 yet, come on, just retweet it while you're listening to the show. That would be really great of you. I'd appreciate it. Moving on to quotes of the week. And as you know, and as you've just heard, I talk a lot about markets and investing. And one of the greatest practitioners and teachers of investments the world has ever known, who was in fact Warren Buffett's mentor, although Buffett then went on, along with Charlie Munger, his partner, to alter the teachings a little bit, was Benjamin Graham. And he talked about the massive benefits of buying incredibly cheaply. And I think I'm right in saying that he would teach, if you can buy shares in a company at a price where the company is effectively being sold for 2/3 of the value of its cash holdings, then clearly you have a massive buffer. Now you can imagine, how could you possibly ever buy shares so cheaply? Well, listener, you haven't been around long enough. There have been times when shares have been that cheap. The S&P 500 trades on about 23 price earnings right now. Warren Buffett loves it when it's down at 5. You have to reasonably expect at some point it's going to go there. It'll take a couple of decades from when it starts, but you have to expect that it'll go down from the mid-20s to 5 at some point in the future. But Ben Graham said this: the purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary. It's sheer genius, and it's so simple. If you buy something particularly cheaply, you don't have to worry about what someone thinks it might do in the future. It either goes bust or it makes you an absolute packet. So long as the business is essentially sound and the management is sound, you are going to make a fortune out of that investment. The purpose of the margin of safety is to render the forecast unnecessary. As far as I can tell, most forecasts are unnecessary. And certainly when I look at macroeconomists, when I look at pundits saying this or that is going to happen to this company or this economy or this sector, they are generally unnecessary because nobody knows the future. And as I've said in a previous show, even later on, when you look back and you see if X person was right, well, he might have been. Or it might have been something happened which he didn't comment on that made the share price do whatever it did. You don't even know in the future if what someone says today is accurate. We've no idea. Could be anything that caused something to happen. I want to just check. Yeah. Before I finish on the other one that I've just got there, I want to quote that lovely socialist Hillary Clinton, who said this on the 11th of March 2014, when asked what have been her accomplishments, bearing in mind she was going to announce herself as a candidate for the presidency, and she was the Secretary of State for the United States. Quote, "My accomplishments as Secretary of State? Well, I'm glad you asked. My proudest accomplishment, in which I take the most pride, mostly because of the opposition it faced early on, you know, the remnants of prior situations and mindsets that were too narrowly focused in a manner whereby they may have overlooked the bigger picture, and we didn't do that, and I'm proud of that. Very proud. I would say that's a major accomplishment." Unquote. And this is the woman that the media and the whole establishment wanted to be the most powerful politician on the planet. The media and the establishment want Jeremy Corbyn, who is the leader of the Socialist Communist Labour Party in the United Kingdom. Indeed, the Labour Party National Executive Committee just had its elections in the last week or so, and the NEC is now totally communist and Marxist. It's not just left of centre, it's brutally socialist, as are the top leaders of the UK Labour Party. And Jeremy Corbyn said this in advance of the 2017 UK general election. Quote, "No, we won't be borrowing. A bank will give us money and we will obviously pay them back over time with a little bit on top for their trouble. But we won't be borrowing anything." Unquote. It's so remarkable, I'm going to say it again. Quote, "No, we won't be borrowing. A bank will give us money and we will obviously pay them back over time with a little bit on top for their trouble. But we won't be borrowing anything." Unquote. Do you know what the most remarkable thing is? Millions of people in the United Kingdom trust the Labour Party. Listener, Monday the 22nd of January 2018, I have had an absolute blast, and I look forward to talking to you again next week. I hope you will follow Booms Busts Show on Twitter. I hope you will feed back what I've been saying in today's show, and I hope that you will retweet, it's just one click, you will retweet podcast number 40, the pinned tweet. As I say, I've had a blast. I'll see you next week.